All right. Well, welcome, friends. Hello there. Good to see you all. And thanks for joining us here with the Men and Masculine Folks Network, which is a program of men as peacemakers. We are excited to welcome you to our Kitchen Table Conversations series, where we are shaping new meanings of masculinity that are authentic, caring, and thoughtful. Today is our 67th conversation, I believe, and we are very excited to have a conversation, Hunter and I, and then our pal Felix may pop in as well. He had a last minute grant deadline thing that popped up. For those who work in the nonprofits, we know how that happens. And so hopefully he'll join us, and if not, we'll see him next time. But thank you so much again for tuning in. If you're watching this live on our Facebook page or YouTube channel, or if you're watching after the fact, or even listening to this conversation on our brand new podcast version on Spotify or Podbean, we're very excited to have you all join us. And so before we hop into our conversation, I'll just take a minute to introduce myself and then Hunter as well. So I am Sean Hayes, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. I am here in Duluth, Minnesota at Men as Peacemakers, and just really been looking forward to chatting about gratitude and as always, connecting with my pals here at the kitchen table. So I'll pass it over to you, Hunter.
Thank you, Sean. Hello, everyone. My name's Hunter Beckstrom. I use he, him, and his pronouns, and I'm coming to y'all from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I work at the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and happy to be here for our 67th conversation.
Awesome. So 'tis the season, and as you may have seen, our conversation today is going to be around gratitude. We just obviously Thanksgiving happened last week, and whether you celebrate that, whether you call it feast day or just a family gathering, there is this theme of gratitude as we move through November and then December with all of the different holidays that come at this time of the year. And it seems like there is a consistent theme of gratitude and remembering, reflecting on all of the many things and people and reasons we have to feel that gratitude. And so I'm just excited to kind of hear more about what you're thinking about when it comes to this, Hunter. And I know I've got a couple of things to share. And so maybe I'll just open it up, Hunter, if you want to share anything that maybe has come to mind leading up to our conversation. And then we can also look at some of our questions here too.
Well, I think in our wider society, we don't often spend time or practice gratitude very often, only when a certain event, such as holidays, if folks are celebrating, really calls for it. And oftentimes, even if that is the case, it doesn't feel like it's very intentional. And so really being able to kind of double down into that idea of sitting in the current space with the folks that you potentially might be sharing that space with, and really being able to share some of that space and talk about gratitude and the impact that those folks have on you and what you can then create in your wider community. I think it's really important to spend some more time on gratitude than we historically do in our world, for sure.
Definitely agree with you there. And it's interesting because, I have a 5-year-old now at home, and she was with me on Thanksgiving last week and unfortunately was sick. And so we couldn't be with family that day. But I spent a little bit of time talking about this is this day, Thanksgiving, and a lot of people really enjoy celebrating it. And we talk about being thankful. And then there's also a lot of folks who are Indigenous and others who don't actually want to celebrate this holiday because of the actual true story, right, of history, and this whole sort of story that many of us learned of, like the Pilgrims and Indians and becoming friends and sharing food. Like I think that did maybe happen, and we also know that so much more violence and exploitation and genocide took place, right? So I was sort of trying to explain to my kid in very simple terms, why this holiday is kind of challenging. And at one point she said, what's thankful? What does that mean to be thankful? And I was like, oh man, she asked such good questions. And then I'm like, oh crap, yeah, how do I explain this thing? Um and so yeah, try to define thankfulness to a 5-year old. But I basically just said it's like, taking time to think about all of the good things in our life and how happy they make us, and we're thankful. It's like we say thank you when we get something good, or whatever. And so it's a kind of a concept that I think so many of us are familiar with, but you're right, I think we just don't take the time to be intentional with it. And so I know for me, and one of our kind of first questions we wanted to go into today was around, during challenging, hard, really kind of devastating times that we're living through right now. Um, how do we find gratitude, or how do we maintain a sense of that thankfulness and that appreciation when things feel so icky and hard and violent, kind of all of the time? Um, and I know that, for myself, personally, it's been a challenging year as well in my, personal life and in my family. And so I actually just very recently, maybe in the last 2 months, I have this small group of besties, we call ourselves, and there's three of us, and we Snapchat all the time about just like the crazy, weird things happening in our lives and check in, and that has been something that my friend Annalisa has sort of started doing. We never actually talked about like, let's do this gratitude thing, but we just sort of all started sharing like, hey, today I'm feeling grateful for you all, and I'm feeling grateful for my friends, whatever comes up that day. And then sort of all three of us started doing it. And then now it's like, oh, this is actually a really cool gratitude practice that just sort of naturally came up. And I know for myself, there's definitely days where I will watch their snaps and I hear what they're thankful for, and I think, God, what the hell am I grateful for today? And there's always something. Like I can always find something, um, and I feel like their stories and what they share about their gratitude also kind of helps prompt me to be like, oh, yeah, I have that, or that reminds me of this other thing that I'm very grateful for. And so I'd be curious, Hunter, what about you in challenging times. How do you like? Do you have any type of gratitude practice that you do regularly, or what might you say about that?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about challenging times and gratitude, I think you really spoke to this already, Sean, but kind of this idea of like holding multiple truths, like even when we are having these difficult, frustrating, stressful times, like there are, even if it's these small, minuscule nuggets of circumstances in which we can be grateful for. And so, in my mind, and this is something that I do not practice nearly as much as I should, but I think a way that we can really lean into gratitude is just being mindful and staying in the present. And I think that is difficult when it comes to challenging circumstances because whether it's hearing current events on the news, or you have a deadline approaching, or any type of other type of stressful event, typically we just want to push forward and get it over with already, right? And then once that stressful event is over, what do? We typically just like ignore it, out of sight, out of mind, and we just move past it. And I think that is, on the one hand, completely understandable due to the conflict or stress that we were experiencing. But being able to take a moment and reflect and stay in the present creates that source of gratitude, because it can be how we overcame adversity as an individual in doing a group project or meeting a deadline, or lessons that we've learned, or despite kind of the adversity that might be happening, finding community in that space, right? And so I think being able to slow down and stay in the present creates that space of gratitude and appreciation. And I think this is also very connected to white supremacy as well, because we've all lived and grown up in a culture of white supremacy that really pushes kind of perfectionism, worship of the written word, a sense of urgency. And so it's really hard to slow down and stay in the present, in my mind. And that is something I have really, really struggled with, because I feel like I'm such a planner. I have to make lists and lists every single day. I feel like I have to think about the next day constantly, right? And so really being able to slow down and stay in the moment and be mindful of that, I think really does produce this sense of gratitude. And really being able to share that in space with community is, just so much more transformative too.
Definitely can relate to the lists and the planning and the thinking, the constant thinking ahead and what's next. And yeah, I think you're onto something there about focusing on the present. And that is so challenging, because we all have the pressures, whether it's from our work or community or family, all of those things that we have to do, or that we want to do. And yet that just causes me so much anxiety, to be honest. I mean, it doesn't actually help a whole lot in my world, at least. And yeah, so actually, like, trying to turn off my brain in these moments where I'm sort of having to report back to the besties, like, what is making me feel grateful today. It does. It's like I have to shut off everything else and really like tune in to like how my body is feeling, how rested, and how all of these different components of how I'm feeling. And oftentimes, the gratitude just, I mean, it comes up right away. It's like, oh man, I'm like super grateful for like this wonderful cup of coffee. And I mean, so it's like it can be these little things, right, that literally are not so little when it comes to it. If you've had a crappy day and then you finally have that cup of coffee, or that, whatever it is, right? Food or whatever brings folks joy. Um, it's like that, it's like the sort of cliche, like silver lining, or the rainbow after the storm. But gosh, and I just also am thinking about how much privilege so many of us have, and like how much we really do have, to be grateful for in this country in so many ways. And then, of course, there's still like all of this oppression and violence and war, literally war and genocide happening across the globe. And so it's this weird balance that we have to find, or, that some of us are trying to find, right?
And I think oftentimes it's scary to sit in that balance too. It's like people just want to like go one side or the other, and it's kind of difficult to be able to hold that aspect of multiple truths, because it is uncomfortable. And different forms of oppression and white supremacy have really taught us to evade that kind of what I think to be like this both and thinking, rather than either or. Because in my mind, when we are kind of reflecting on both and, it does also, as we mentioned before, really produce aspects of appreciation and gratitude as well. Because even if we are experiencing difficulty in one space, we can still find gratitude at the same time, but maybe adjacently as well. And something that just was recently experienced for me, typically trying to get together with loved ones and family members during the holidays. And I wasn't able to do that as I traditionally do with my family members. But I had some friends who all have like family out of state, and I have family in state. And they're very used to not being able to spend time with family members. And so they just kind of had a friends gathering and everything and invited me over. And I was like, wow, like I don't often have to worry about not gathering with my closest loved ones and everything during times that we like to get together. And, these folks had created their own community and welcomed me in. And that felt incredibly grateful and appreciative, for them providing space and welcoming and everything like that. And so I do think that speaks back to the fact of when we do not consider even those small pieces about how we can be grateful, like a cup of coffee, Sean, it kind of potentially can erase like empathy or lead to assumptions as well. So really keeping some of those ideas in mind is important as well.
Yeah. Oh, that made my brain think about two things. One of the things I think that just popped up was like, and I think about men and masculine folks and how much privilege we carry in this society and sort of the entitlement that so many of us are taught from a young age, like we just sort of expect these good things to happen in our lives, or we expect people to be kind and to, invite us to things, or, whatever it is. So it's like there's something there about how can we, recognize sort of where that entitlement stuff shows up in our lives. And then again, like trying to find that balance and like, I think you're onto something there with the empathy. It's like if you can empathize and actually see the people who are doing the things that are bringing you joy, right? Like that are taking care of people or, whatever. It's like if you can see and look a little deeper, it's like, man, this is really kind that someone is taking the time to invite me to a Friendsgiving or whatever it is. I think just so often in our busy capitalistic, always working to create more and do more society, it's just so easy for us to stay shallow. I think about sort of my traditional family gatherings in the past, and it's like we go around and we say a thing we're grateful for. And it's usually like, I'm grateful for my family. I'm thankful for, my church or my job or, whatever it is. And I was just thinking, say more, like what about your family are you grateful for? Is it a specific person? And what does that person do to make you feel grateful? Like, let's dig a little deeper, right? Because then I think it allows us to build those relationships actually a little bit deeper with family members and or friends, right? I think a lot of people, like you shared, have different types of chosen family gatherings or friendsgivings, and so I'm just thinking about that. It's like when we can actually do a little bit of that deeper reflecting in ourselves, it like sort of allows the other folks around to do that too. Like, oh crap, Sean actually talked about something deeper. I shouldn't just say I'm thankful for family. Like I should share a little bit more, and sort of modeling that. Not that it's easy or that I do it every time, because I definitely don't.
Yeah, and that makes me think of for some reason my brain is relating this conversation to self-care and kind of this like capitalist consumerist perception of self-care, and how, as you kind of alluded to, like I've done that as well. Like at a family gathering and like, oh, let's all go around and say what or who we're grateful for. And it doesn't feel authentic. And I've even been in spaces where people will, openly joke about it or whatever it might be. And so that it just feels so unintentional. But then on the flip side, when we really try to implement self care and thus hopefully gratitude each and every day, even in very small ways, that is how we are able to create lasting individual change. But then also, like as you mentioned before, like, oh, like, if someone or Sean is saying this, like maybe I can also double down and go a little bit deeper too. So I don't know why, but my brain just like, oh, self-care seems so relevant to this gratitude conversation as well.
Yeah, that is interesting. I was kind of getting a vibe around that as well, and I think it's as you said, it's like there's the individual care and ways that we can care for ourselves, and then be grateful for those opportunities, and then I think about like larger within our families and within our communities, that collective care, like I think that collective care oftentimes is what we feel grateful for. When we say I'm thankful for my family, it's because those folks collectively and in their own unique individual ways, like show up and show care and give support to me in ways that are actually really helpful and thoughtful. And so it's, I don't know. We're just so quick to skim over things like this. And I'm thinking about what you had shared before too, right? About the either or sort of thinking and the and thinking, like there can be multiple things that can be true at the same time. And so how do we learn to hold gratitude along with maybe grief and sadness or hurt and pain, whether it's physical or emotional. And I think about, this time of year is really challenging for a lot of people for many different reasons, right? I mean, I think, specifically about my community, the queer and trans community, and how many of our people don't have those invitations. They're not invited to family gatherings, or they don't feel safe and comfortable going to those spaces because they don't have people who support them and support their wholeness, all of their identity. And I think about people who have lost loved ones around this time of year as well. I just had a friend was sharing me about that, and it's like, dang, how there's just so much that all of us are holding at this time and always. Um, and what are ways that I can, maybe care for, or, express my gratitude for the people in my life, so that they really do know um, and can feel my gratefulness or gratitude towards them and just being in relationship together.
Yeah, I certainly think that what's coming to mind for me again is going back to that piece on empathy and how, when we're talking about gratitude, I think it really recognizes ourselves and our humanity first and foremost. And I think that is completely necessary because in small, like one story I have is I was recently connecting with a few colleagues about the impact and our gratitude of participating in a racial justice committee. And even though we might not have formally kind of, and not to say that any type of gratitude has to be formal, by no means it has to be that way, but wasn't planned out to be sharing of gratitude. But at the end of that small conversation, just feeling like such a full heart and like feeling so connected within that space, right? And knowing that in spaces that we have and can share gratitude with others, I think allows for the both and of gratitude or grief or whatever it might be to happen at the same time. Because I think, especially within that space, I'm talking about racial justice, being in a space where I feel like I can be comfortable and be vulnerable, and yet at the same time be challenged, called to a higher self, and learn at the same time. I think that is necessary, because if it's only a space in which is comfortable, I think that can also lead to harm, actually, as well, right? And so, um, really having that both and of, challenging, and also how we can, call our higher selves, I think is a way we can put it, and that also is a source of gratitude.
Yeah, I love that story that you shared. And I think we've all been in spaces where we feel that similar feeling, right? Just like a full heart, and being like with our people, or people who share value, similar values as us. And it kind of brings me maybe to our next question, is kind of around like collective gratitude, or how can we practice gratitude within our community, or like a group setting. And it's like, your story kind of set that up perfectly. And thinking about um, my very new, gratitude practice that I'm doing with just a couple of friends, right? It's just three of us. But what I can share about that is that, um, it's this way of us getting to know each other on a different level, right? We're continuing to deepen our relationships as friends. Um, And then it also has this effect of like, if I wake up and I'm just like, man, today sucks. Or, like you just wake up on the wrong side of the bed, or things are really hard, like you're struggling with things in your life, and it's hard to find or to see the good. Popping open Snapchat, in our case, and hearing from, my friends Annalisa and Kia, like the things that they're grateful for, their kids, or their coworkers or partners, or whatever it is. My one friend loves watching the birds in her backyard, and so sometimes she'll share videos of these birds flying around, and it's like this way of, it kind of takes me or pulls me out of that headspace that feels so negative and so limiting, like sort of, a tunnel of just darkness, right? And it's like, oh yeah, like it helps me sort of lift my head up, or lift my eyes up to the bigger picture, the horizon, of what's happening in my life, but also like the world, right? Like I don't know, it helps shed light on the things that maybe I wouldn't have thought of, right? That I'm grateful for. Um, and it also, I don't know, it just fills me with like love and gratitude that my friends are experiencing these good things, right? That they're grateful for. And so getting to sort of feel their gratitude and the goodness that comes from that in their lives. Um, and then it ripples out, it impacts me in such a positive way. Um, Even on the days when I'm like, man, grumbling about what am I grateful for today? It's like, oh, dang. Yeah. Oh, yeah. My friend talked about her kid doing this cute thing. Oh, yeah. My kid did this cute thing the other day, too. And, it just sparks, right? It's like being with our people, being within these group settings, rather than just kind of having our own sort of solo individual, you know, practices, which are also good. I feel like that's sort of where we go to normally, though, is like around our individual self care, or self gratitude. And it feels slightly uncomfortable to shift it into like that group setting, because again, it's like you're being vulnerable. Like the goal is to be authentic, right? And to be honest, and to share real things, and not just be like, I'm thankful for my family. But get into those details, and it allows just that deepening of relationships that that I so much appreciate because I've had so many surfacey, friendships and things over the years, and I just don't want to do that anymore. And so I love learning and getting to um, really empathize and to feel the goodness and the thankfulness from my people, and then getting to share it back. I think it works both ways. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it makes me think about when you were kind of sharing about your friendships and what some of you and your folks have done. And Sean and I were just chatting before we jumped on the live here today. I got to see some friends from Arizona recently, and only having the chance to see them like once or twice a year, I think I am more grateful and practice gratitude when seeing them. And I think it's interesting how this can relate to masculinity because we have a group of men and masculine friends, and we are all, I would say, like pretty traditionally masculine presenting, but we had brunch, and then before we all departed, like we had a group hug in the parking lot. And I think that probably for some people like that, why are a group of five men like hugging or something like that? I feel like some folks might be put off by that, but I think that we do things like that we're grateful for. Just be open about our emotions. We text each other like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that we got to see each other. I love you guys, all this, right? And I think that's really important, talking about masculinity and showing that gratitude in an intentional way. And it also makes me think that being grateful for those friendships and feeling like I express it much, much more because I see those folks much less frequently. Whereas, like men and masculine folks in my family who I have much gratitude for, but might not display that type of behavior either, or it doesn't feel like we can have as deep conversations as well. And so that gratitude piece kind of feels like it's missing sometimes. So how can we then again take kind of that individual to then the community piece of gratitude and kind of pull it into our other spaces? Because I do think we all kind of have perhaps these pockets where we can really practice a lot of gratitude and it feels really great. And at the same time, how can we try to expand that a little bit? And it's really hard, and I think that's something that I've been trying to work on a little bit. It's a little intimidating, but we want to be able to experience that gratitude along an entire spectrum, right? Not just within kind of one small group. We really want to be able to expand that our entire lifestyle, hopefully.
Yes, expanding it. Yeah, it actually, I love hearing about your like five dude group hug. And it actually made me think about, I recently moved to a new apartment complex, and I was heading out the door the other day, and it was like I don't know, probably an evening or something. And I had seen two people walking through the parking lot, two guys or masculine looking people. And they were like, I don't know, wrapping up a hang or something, and just gave each other this big old like bear hug kind of thing. And like, I want to say one of them like picked up the other guy, and it was just like, wow, I love that. I don't know who those guys are, right? I have not met them if they're my neighbors. But yeah, I think, we just really don't see a lot of those displays of like genuine love and care for our dude bros, or whatever you want to say. um, and it's so good, it's so healthy, it's so healing, at least in my experience, to be able to have these friendships with guys who, yeah, man, I mean, when I see y'all in person from the kitchen table here or the Men and Masculine Folks Network, it's just like, come here, like it's so just good to have those types of relationships. And when we think about violence prevention, when we think about all of the just terrible things happening, whether it's right here in our communities, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's, wherever, right? There's just so much happening, and we need men and masculine folks to kind of wake up to these sorts of concepts, right? Like if more men and masculine people could show that or could feel that care and then show it and express it, right? And to be vulnerable, to open up and deepen, grow those relationships with their buddies where maybe they're not talking about the Vikings and Packers all the time. Maybe they are checking in about, hey, how's your heart doing? How's your marriage? How's like checking in about the real kind of things that each of us deal with on the day to day. And I could not be more grateful for the friendships I've made, through this network and the work I do at Men as Peacemakers. And just last night, my buddy Felix, who's on these, conversations, called me up and, was sharing some stuff going on in his life, and I got to share as well. And every time that happens, I think, why don't we do this more? I'm so grateful for those moments, for those conversations, where I am able to be honest and say, like, this is really sucky right now in my life, or actually, today was a really great day, and I hope that same energy flows to you, brother. It brings a lot of joy, even if it's hard stuff that we're talking about, right? It's that connection to community, into community, to other humans. I think that really is where a lot of gratitude comes from, maybe when I think about my life, at least. And so, Hunter, what are some things that you're grateful for?
When you were talking
In
about
this moment.
one of your friends and maybe like grateful for the birds in their yard or something, I was just thinking, working from home and in times of stress, my partner and I have a bunch of animals. And so it was funny because I was just looking at my phone earlier today and an image on my like photos like popped up from a year ago. It was my dog Wally when he was like 2 months old, just like this tiny little guy. Like he's got a pot or like a big old pot belly still and everything. And so I am completely grateful for my animals. It might seem like a small thing, but feeling like grateful, being able to have the privilege to work from home and I can just see a couple of my animals hanging out and like, hey, if I just had a stressful meeting, I can just like go and give my dog Wally some pets and, do what I need to do to, to be able to make it a little bit better and have some gratitude there. So definitely animals are a big thing for me.
I was going to say, I think there's a lot of folks out there who would agree with you, myself included. Although I'm kind of annoyed with my cat right now because he's very meowy. But I am grateful for him. And I will say that, because I mean, that's just a little thing, right? This cat annoys me to no ends. And then, when my kid is with me, he's just the best cat for her, and she loves him to pieces. And it's just like, okay. This cat brings so much joy, and I am very grateful for any and all joy, right, that I can help bring to my kiddo and to others in my life. What am I grateful for? I mean, I think there's so much. And this is the weird part for me because I'm always like, yeah, what am I grateful for? There's a ton of things. But like when I try to drill down and actually get a little bit more specific, like thinking about today or this week, gosh, I'm grateful for downtime this week. I've gotten to have a couple of nights where I just didn't have a lot going on, and I had sort of originally planned to be working and doing some door dashing, and I kind of was just like, I feel really tired and I feel like it would be probably best to just rest, and to just stay at home and be a couch potato. It's my favorite form to take if I'm not working or busy doing something. And so, I'm grateful for those times this week that I've been able to just give myself that time when usually, the the sort of pattern that so many of us fall into is just got to keep going, got to stay busy, got to be doing fun things every moment, or whatever it is, but also just being at home and being in my space, and just like having a sense of this is enough right now. I don't need to do more. um, I can just rest. And on sort of a sillier note, but it's been bringing me a lot of joy and I'm grateful for it. Speaking of couch potato stuff, I recently started watching a new show on Netflix called Sex Education.
Oh,
And I don't know if you've seen this, Hunter, or if our viewers, if you've heard of this show or seen it, but it is so hilarious. I have literally laughed out loud so many times, and it's set in like a high school, maybe in Europe or Britain or so. I don't know where. It's like a British kind of, lots of British accents. So I don't know where, but there's just so much funny stuff. I love the characters, and just the awkwardness of like thinking back to high school and like going through puberty and all these things, and these kids have all of these crazy wild questions, right, that we all had, like how do these things work? And so it's like I'm learning, I'm laughing, and it's just been kind of a little fun silver lining for me just this week. So I recommend that show. We do not advertise for them or anything, but I would say check it out if you want some good laughs. And there's definitely a lot of sex, so I will preface that, but in a way that is just, it feels really authentic, and really, yeah, real life. So
yeah, that is. I think I saw the first two episodes, but this is yet another reminder to go check out that show because I've heard so many good things, and it seems so relevant. And I remember hearing that, as you just mentioned, Sean, like most of us have experienced these things at one time, and it's really important to be able to have those conversations. But one thing that came into my mind as well to be grateful for is in line with this kind of gratitude and challenging pieces as well is, um, for some unfortunate circumstances, my sister has moved in with me and my partner, and I think I've felt very grateful for that, and it's also been challenging because I think it's the space feels a little bit smaller. I had to move my office and everything, and trying to help out my sister, get to the goals and things that she wants to do, and also being very grateful because it's felt like for some time like felt very similar to the conversations we were having before, like it feels so like surface level or so unintentional, but now that my sister and I are living together, it feels like we've really been able to be more authentic with one another, and been able to kind of figure out been able to figure out problems together and problem solve. And I think that has been, a really just a breath of fresh air historically the last couple of years has how our relationship has been. And so, again, I think speaking back to that, like, how can you find the gratitude in the challenging times is really important, and of course like so much more gratitude than challenging pieces in my current circumstance with my sister. But um, yeah, I think really digging in a little bit deeper, and for me especially, what I want to be able to do for moving forward is like really try to be more intentional about the current relationships with family members or friends or other loved ones that I have great relationships with already, but be a little bit more authentic and, let's dig a little bit deeper, because I think, there's so much more connection to be had than there already is.
Yeah, man, it's interesting. I feel like we're all sort of putting on this show in a lot of ways, right? Of like how our life is or how we want other people to see, us and our lives. And I oftentimes think that people, look at me or look at people and just make assumptions about like, oh man, their life is just great and they've got it all figured out. And we sort of play that role, right? We don't really want to be honest and open about the hard things. And that was something I that just came to me as well. As I've had moments throughout my life, and I would say even this year, which has been kind of particularly hard for me. And it's like going through those challenging times, you can't necessarily see it. But I feel like after I have come through some of these hard things in my life, I can look back and I think, man, I wish I didn't have to go through that hard thing. And also, like, I'm glad that that happened because I learned this and I connected with this person. And like all of these good things came from that really hard thing. And so, um, yeah, there's something there for folks who are able to look back and um, even if it's just looking back at this week or this year or looking back further than that, right? Like being able to be at a place where we are healed enough and cared for and supported enough where we can see like, wow, even through that, like I have gratitude for that experience or that harm I experienced because it helped me, whatever, fill in the blank. Um, so and I really like what you said too about like moving forward, wanting to try to be more intentionally open, and sharing with the people in your life. And man, some days it just feels hard to do that, and other days it feels easy. And I think the more that we practice being open, the more that we practice gratitude and these values that I think a lot of us share, um, it gets so much easier. It just sort of becomes a part of the norm or a part of the relationship or friendship, and that just like allows so many good things to grow and to come from that. So I look forward to hearing more about how that goes for you, and I'll take some examples from you as well there. Gosh, yeah. So maybe as we're kind of coming to the end of our conversation here for today, um, hmm, I'm like trying to think of a good sort of wrap up question. And if you think of one, Hunter, feel free to jump in. But man, I just think as we're coming to the end of this year and our next conversation, in 2 weeks, we're going to be kind of doing like a year in review. How was this year? How did it go for us? How did it go at the kitchen table? What's coming next for us in 2024 and things like that. But um, yeah, I guess I'm just going to keep it open and say, I'm going to think more about that too, Hunter. I think just like expanding the gratitude practice that I have with these two people and like how can I expand that out to like my brothers or like more people in my life who I think we all have so much to be grateful for, and we don't often have someone ask us, what are you grateful for today? um, and so now, yeah, it's just got my brain spinning and thinking about the people that I want to build with and build or get closer with, I'm just going to be randomly asking some people, I think, in the future, what are you grateful for?
Mhm. I like that a lot, John. I think what's coming to mind for me is I have this assumption that everyone does want to be closer with others in some capacity, right? Whether to create new relationships or to, dig a little bit deeper into their current relationships. But it's scary to have that conversation or take that step, and I think it's uncomfortable, and people don't really know how to do that. And I'm constantly trying to figure that out. But at the same time, I feel like that is also kind of this idea of like white supremacy as like perfectionism. Like, oh, like if I just ask this question, or if I like invite this friend or family member and we, start talking about sports, how can I like try to like bring us into a little bit deeper conversation? And so I think, again, I think people really value, at least I certainly do, really value transparency and just authenticity. And I think everyone really wants to develop some of those current or new relationships that they might be in search of. And just kind of sharing that, as you're saying as well, Sean, like, how can I put this into practice more and maybe model some of this for other folks, right? Because I think everyone's thinking it, but it's a little scary and uncomfortable to like say it in the first place. So if we can try to create that space or lean into that uncomfortability, I think more often than not, we will be grateful that we had done that in the first place.
I love that. Yeah, I feel like that was something that I heard early on when I started working here at Men as Peacemakers. We were talking a lot about the habits of white supremacy and just this idea around comfortability and not getting uncomfortable. And yeah, that always struck me hard. And I think about that a lot. It's like, okay, whatever this thing is that I'm doing or a conversation that I need to have or whatever it is that feels uncomfortable. I think you're exactly right. When I do make that choice to lean in, even though I feel awkward, even though I don't know how that other person's going to respond, I mean, they might just be like, screw off, Sean, I don't want to talk about that, but most of the time, it really, um, is something that I end up being grateful for because there's so much to learn from the people around us. There's so much to be grateful for in those people and in our relationships. Yeah, and just being grateful for where we are in our lives. A lot of us have survived a lot of hard things. We've gone through a lot of challenges in our own ways, and being grateful that we're still here, that we are surviving, and we are not only surviving but attempting to thrive and figure out what that looks like for us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that because I try to have that in my mind at all times, and especially like coming from a prevention space, like not only do we want to stop violence from happening, like how can we continue to move forward into thriving together as a large community?
Yep. So maybe for those of you who might be thinking, what the heck does gratitude have to do with violence prevention? Um, I don't know how I would exactly answer that, but what I would say is that I feel like so many of these things are connected when we are grateful, when we take the time to really see and empathize and connect with the people around us. We know from the work that we do and the research and data out there that when people feel connected to community, that is prevention. That causes, or that allows for less violence to happen because people are, rather than feeling isolated and alone and scared or angry or, whatever. I think about so many men who you know, feel really big feelings and then don't know how to express that or don't know how to share that without being violent. If we can learn as men and masculine folks how to hold those feelings, how to think about the things we're grateful for, and how to do some of this growth, we're just going to become more and more safe people to be in community and to be responsible for being a part of community, and rather than just feeling entitled and showing up and wanting things, it's like we actually then begin to feel a part of that, and we have that responsibility to also give into community too. So
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of good stuff to think about today. I appreciate this conversation a lot with you, Hunter, and for all of those who were able to tune in or are listening or watching after the fact, we are grateful to be connected with you, even if it's just through the interwebs right now. And we always invite y'all to reach out to us and connect even deeper. Or if you have ideas about conversations that you would like to hear about, if you'd like to be a guest, you want to get more involved with kitchen table conversations, we would love to invite you in and would be grateful for those connections. And so, yeah, thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. As a reminder, we are holding these kitchen table conversations every other Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. Our next live conversation will be on Thursday, December 14th at 12 p.m. And as I mentioned before, we'll sort of be doing a wrap up of the year and kind of reviewing and reflecting on how 2023 has been for us and for our communities. And then we'll also be looking ahead to next year and how some changes will be happening and shifts will be made with our kitchen table conversation. So definitely stay tuned to learn more about that. And as always, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, like our page. You can subscribe to us on YouTube and get notifications every time we're live, so you can catch us on your lunch break or coffee break or whatever. And you can now follow our podcast version of Kitchen Table Conversations on Spotify and Podbean right now, and more areas or podcast locations to come as we learn more about how to do that. So follow us on all the things and connect with us. We really deeply appreciate being in community with all of you. Thank you again, Hunter, and we will see y'all in 2 weeks. So take care until then, and have a kitchen table conversation this week. We challenge you and share some of the things that you're grateful for with you people. All right, see you later.